at the end of 2019. So much appreciation to Brian Murphy, the Vice President of Harleysville Bank and an active member of our chamber, along with Jean for hosting and organizing the event today. A huge thank you to our presenters today for getting on and taking out an hour of your time to be with us to provide us some valuable information. I'm going to turn it over to Brian in a minute, who will introduce our speakers as well as provide some housekeeping items. But first, I just want to also welcome you all. If you're not a member of the Chamber of Commerce, to please join us. We'll send you an invitation after the Zoominar today, as well as we'll send you our email address, which is norristown-chamber-of-commerce.org, and our email, which is norristown-chamber-of-commerce@gmail.com. So all that will be in this presentation. We are an organization of members who are really about partnerships, collaboration, sharing of information and resources that are vital for our businesses and also for the communities in which we operate to grow. And right now, as we're kind of still in the pandemic, but looking to improving with the vaccines, we're also about recovery. So that's what 2021 is focused on in our partnerships with the Montgomery County Commerce Department and along with other chambers in Montgomery County. We have worked with them to secure a lot of PPE kits that we have, many of them to distribute right now, at least 7 for any organization, nonprofit that may need them in Montgomery County. So please reach out. You can pick them up. We're working with the Norristown Fire Department, so they have secured many of them for us. Brian used to individually use his vehicle to pick some up for us, so we appreciate that. But they're housed at the Horizon Theater, Center Theater, and at the fire department. So lots of PPE kits. They're valued over $500, I'm told, with all the things that are inside of them. So I thank you all for joining us today as we work through 2021 together. I'm going to turn it over to Brian and look forward to the presentation today. Thank you. Brian?
Thanks, Kim. And we appreciate you including Harleysville Bank in your Zoominar series at the Chamber. As Kim said, I'm with Harleysville Bank. I'm at the West Norriton location on Ridge Pike, right across the street from the Jeffersonville Golf Course. I've been to Harleysville Bank about 5 years and in banking for about 20 years. Harleysville Bank is a small community bank. We're 7 branches in Montgomery and Bucks County. Our strength is just that we are a small community bank. We can do everything that the larger banks can do, but we do it at a much higher level of personal customer service. I came from the bigger banks, and it's a world of difference how Harleysville Bank delivers its service to our customers. We care about our customers. I'm going to introduce the panelists. The panelists will speak for about the next 40 minutes. Following the last speaker, there will be a question and answer segment of the Zoominar today. Jean Weeder will be fielding the questions. If you have questions, you can enter them in the chat room during the presentation, and we'll get to all the questions. If we run out of time and there's more questions, we promise that we will answer those questions. The panelists we have your email information, and we will address all questions. Additionally, at the end of the presentation today, the last page will be all the contact information of all the panelists and speakers today. So we certainly invite you to reach out at any time to any of us if you have any questions or if there's anything that we can do. Okay, to introduce the panelists in the order that they'll speak. First is Mark McCreary. He's the corporate administrative partner of Fox Rothschild. His office is in Market Street in Philadelphia. He is the chair of the privacy and data security practice, focusing a segment of the practice on compliance with privacy related laws, rules, and regulations, as well as responses in the event of a data breach. He is certified by the International Association of Privacy Professionals. Mark also practiced in intellectual property and law of the internet for the firm. He's software licensing and digital data security protection. All our speakers today, their bios, their credentials are run the whole page. I'm just giving a quick synopsis of each one. Second will be Rod Kipp. Rod is the operations technology manager at Harrisville Bank. He's been with the bank for about 19 years. Prior to that, he was a partner in a IT consulting company for about 9 years. We know Rod as the IT specialist extraordinaire here at the bank. He handles all our IT problems. And then following Rod will be Chris Schaller. He's the founder of Christo IT. He founded the company in 1999 with the goal of providing small businesses in the Philadelphia region the type of professional IT support that the larger companies enjoy. Chris co-authored a best-selling book, Sitting Duck: Why Your Business is a Cyber Criminal's Ideal Target. Chris is a graduate of Villanova University, and he's a Microsoft certified systems engineer since 1998. With that, I'll turn it over to Mark to begin the panelist presentation.
Great, thanks, Brian, and thanks everybody for attending. So I'll tell you briefly, because we only have a couple minutes for each of us to speak. There's two main topics I'm going to address, and I'm going to shock you right now with the actual PowerPoint. And that's to talk about some of the laws that are going to be facing businesses currently and in the future, because there's a whole wave of them coming. And the second is just kind of what I've seen over the past, I'll call it 10 months, 11 months at this point, of what businesses like yours are facing. Because the uptick in attacks and the sophistication of attacks has really increased. And that's kind of where I live and breathe in my practice. So I want to share some of my observations from that. Let me start off with the legislation. You guys may have heard of the CCPA. It's a California law that was passed a couple years ago, went into effect last year. And there's a lot of discussion around it. You may not have appreciated it when you were hearing about it, but I bet you did hear about it. Because what it did is it gave a lot of rights to consumers about what they can actually do. For example, if I'm a company that is dealing with a California citizen and I'm subject to CCPA, which there's hundreds of thousands of businesses that are, that consumer can come back and request that you delete all their information. That's just one. It's a right to be forgotten. There's others where you have to tell them with whom you shared that information. It's very important that your privacy policies be up to date and very clear. And I know many of you are probably saying, yeah, that's the communist state of California. Why do I care about that? And the reason why is because there's many other states that are doing the exact same thing right now. There's a list here where you can see some of the laws that have passed and some that are pending. Pending right now is Florida, Hawaii, Illinois, Minnesota, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. Virginia is not so much pending as a done deal. They recently passed through both their House and Senate a bill, identical bill, that just needs to be signed into law that's very similar to the California law, even though it goes a few steps further. So let me tell you about the California law. I think that's probably the easiest place to start because this is pretty much what we're going to be seeing companies facing as we go into these new laws coming into effect. First of all, like I said before, and again, just assume this applies to you because that's the only way it's really going to digest with you, I believe, is that you have to make disclosures about the actual personal information that you collect. So you may be a business that's collecting cookies, for example, information from cookies, or you may be having forms on your website, or maybe even something else, something more heavy on the collection. You have to actually tell the individual why you're collecting that information. This is what we're collecting. This is what we're going to do with it. And anything beyond what you just described, you cannot use that information any further unless you get further permission from them. So if you say, I'm collecting your personal information, which is, by the way, just information to identify a person. It's not like financial information. It's just the mere identity of a person. If you say, I'm collecting that information so I can provide the services that you requested to you, and you don't say anything further, you can't do anything else with that information. You can't even sell your business and include that information if you haven't made that disclosure that you may disclose it when you sell your business. It comes up more often where you may have an opportunity where you want to sell them other services that you're not currently offering. You may want to sell it to a third party because you can make money. That's a revenue stream. You have to disclose all that at the time that you do the disclosure, that you do the collection for that to be legal in the states that are going to have these laws. The right to deletion, I told you about before. An individual can come along and say, I want you to get rid of all my information. Now, of course, you can keep the transactional information that you reasonably require for your own records, for a warranty purpose, something like that. But otherwise, you have to, one, find all of that personal information, and two, delete it to the extent you don't truly need it. You can actually, they can opt out, but you can't sell their information. And sale doesn't mean you're just actually getting a monetary amount for it. It means you could be trading it for some other service. You could be giving that information to a bank, for example, and the bank will supplement that information and give it back to you so that you can have more targeted ads, or excuse me, targeted potential sales, but the bank is still going to use the information you gave them. That's considered a sale. When you do that, under the California law, not the Virginia law so far, but under the California law, you actually have to put on your website a little link that says, don't sell my information, and allow them to opt out that easily. You have to be very clear about what you're doing in your privacy policy. I'm going to guess many of you, to the extent you even have a privacy policy for your business, is one that the web design team gave you. That's not going to cut it anymore. You have to really be specific, really personalized to what you do, and you have to be very careful. And the last thing I'll say about CCPA before I move on, because I don't think you guys are probably dealing with minors very often, but there is an issue there. But it includes not only names and personal information I talked about before, it also includes IP addresses that you may collect, or if you have a mobile app, a UDID that you may collect from the mobile device. And anything that's a particular person's preference or characteristic. If you know that they happen to like vacationing in Mexico, that's considered personal information and something that really needs to be disclosed. So CCPA, again, I think a lot of people around here, in my experience with clients, kind of assumed it's not going to apply to them. And that may be true for right now, but again, many states are considering these laws right now. They also took that California law and they changed it a little bit. This year, in the November election, they did another referendum. So they were able to bypass the legislature, and they actually put what's called the CPRA in place. And now this just I adjusted the CCPA a little bit, but it did make difference where it kind of increased the threshold so that fewer businesses were affected by it. You had to at least deal with 100,000 California residents. Originally it was 50,000, now it's 100,000. That they really require you to delete information when it's no longer necessary. I think you guys should pause for a second and think about that. Most businesses, they keep information, if not forever, for much longer than they actually need it. And now it's a law that you actually have to get rid of that information where you don't have a reasonable basis for keeping it anymore. Now, that doesn't mean you just have to delete everything. You may have a reasonable basis, like, for example, to run out of statute of limitations or something like that. But you really do have to start having good records retention management and make sure you get rid of stuff. They've now included where if you have a data breach where you lose information, historically in this country, it's first name or first initial and last name plus something else. And that plus something else is typically a social security number, bank account number, credit card number. Some states will throw in like biometric or health information. They're now including in California an email address. So before, if I had a client come to me and say, hey, we had a data incident, we lost a bunch of names and email addresses, I would tell them, well, you don't have to do anything. You may decide to notify just out of an abundance of caution, but there was no law that requires that. Well, of course, California being California just changed that. And now email addresses are included if it's tagged with a security question. So it's really exposing that. And the craziest part of it is, and this is law, this did not used to be law, it used to be case law, is that there can now be a claim where if you lose consumers' information, they now have a fear of future identity theft. No actual harm. Nothing bad has actually happened, but they're concerned that they now will have a harm in the future. That's now recognized as a cause of action in California. You don't have to show actual harm. We're going to see what the courts do with that when this goes into effect next year. But right now, it's something that's really got a lot of plaintiffs' lawyers' attention because that's been a big problem of their cases when they do data breach cases. Working remotely, and again, you guys, if you have any questions, let's save them until we do the group panel. But that's the law I just kind of want you to be aware of. And I encourage you, really think about this as applying to you now because it's coming sooner or later. And the earlier you change your business practices, the more time you have to do that, the easier it is. But we've all been working remotely since March. I know some of us are going back in the office. You can see I'm coming in a few days a week, and I can see from the background some other folks are also. But generally, the workforce remains out. I can tell you I know people, especially in the financial industry, where they've already know the earliest they're going to be back in the office is December 1st. I know a lot of other colleagues of mine at other firms, their firms have decided that you don't ever have to go back in the office if you don't want to. You have the option of working remotely. So things are really changing for permanent. It's not just going to be temporary for many businesses, but we've seen a lot of issues with that. For example, when you have your employees at home working on computers, the way they access has become an issue. You know, it was a lot of people got thrown into this in March. Luckily, a lot of people have fixed bad habits and gotten better systems in place. But you're dealing with a workforce that's not used to doing that. You realize that when you have a lot of people on the system, the resiliency isn't as great as you thought it might be, and they've had a lot of slowdowns or bad access. We have a lot of people I've seen at clients where they have data incidents that involve the personal computer of the actual employee. They're not using their work-issued laptop, for example. They're using a personal computer, or they've been instructed to use a personal computer to do work, and of course they're doing other stuff on that personal computer, which interferes or creates a more likelihood that there would be a data incident. Paper is something nobody's talking about. We have an extraordinary amount of paper that's still being used. I don't know in March or April or May if you ever went out to try to buy a printer. There weren't a lot of them, and it's because a lot of people realize that they live and die by printers, and so they definitely have people that are printing. And unfortunately, those people, while they may be recycling the paper, they're not shredding it. I've had a number of cases that have been kind of dumpster dive cases or dumpster empty cases where things just get lost. Things fall out the side. People actually find this information, and that's a data breach. I mean, there's a lot of issues that come from that and becomes a big problem. As I mentioned at the beginning, phishing, what we've seen since March, we've never seen anything like it. It only slowed down around the holiday because amazingly these criminals do celebrate the holidays, but it's back on just where it was before, and there's an extraordinary amount of phishing out there right now. You've probably seen it personally, where you've received emails that seem more and more sophisticated. You may have actually had scams that occur by telephone because that's becoming more common too because of the proliferation of spoofing phone numbers. So we see a lot of that's there, and unfortunately, a lot of your employees in your workforce, and maybe even you, really aren't trained how to identify that, how to deal with it. So it's become a real problem. We've seen flaws in IT departments that have come about as a result of this because they were kind of comfortable in what they knew, and remote working wasn't really their forte. So we've seen IT departments that aren't actually able to do this and make it work. And then finally, we've seen a lot of data incidents. The number of clients I've helped with actual data incidents has been remarkable. And I will say two words for you to think about, which is cybersecurity insurance. If you don't have that for your business, I would encourage you to look into it. It's something that helps immensely, both on if you have to pay any sort of fines to a state attorney general, or if you have to do any sort of remediation. And especially the second is if you don't have good backups or your backups also get encrypted and unavailable, the cyber insurance will help you use services to help restore that data. So something to think about. I'm not an insurance broker. I don't make any money from it, but I can tell you clients that have cyber liability insurance when they have an incident are a happier client than ones that don't. So something for you to think about. As I mentioned before, with the out-of-office work, there's just a lot of distractions right now. People are getting better at it, but that doesn't mean they still really are getting good at it. We have people working in kitchens with kids that are also doing homework at the same time, and we have just a lot of distractions that are there. And, you know, heaven forbid, you know, the UPS person shows up with your Amazon delivery while you're working. It's just another distraction. So we see a lot of mistakes being made because of that. We see a lot of COVID scams that are out there. I don't know how many you guys have seen those, but we've seen a lot that have come through. Mobile devices are really interesting. This was my big takeaway that I tried to tell all of our users before the pandemic of how dangerous they were. But one thing we see now is especially that it's becoming more prevalent because we're working from mobile devices. This is a screenshot from an Apple device. Eric Albright is a partner in my Greensboro office. I know Eric, he's a good friend of mine. But when I see it on my phone, my typical thing to do now is to touch it. It will take me into the email and I read the email. I don't go back to the top of the email and see who actually sent it to me. But if you see that exact same email of how it looks like in Outlook, what it looks like in Outlook, you'll see that's Eric Albright's name, but it is certainly not his email address. And so you tend to get a lot more tricked when you're actually on your phone. So I really encourage people, and I encourage you to encourage your employees, be really careful on mobile devices because we're seeing most of our data breaches come through that way. With the IT department, and I'm going to run out of time, we see a lot of more issues that are coming from this. Luckily, we're seeing a lot of people that are spending time and money increasing and solidifying their actual IT backends and doing more with it. They're putting things like SIMs in place. They're patching more regularly, and they're making sure that they're doing best practices. So again, this is a lot to throw at you in 10 minutes. I see a lot of people that think because their employees are able to work remotely, they've done enough. And I have to encourage you, they have to be taught how to actually work remotely safely, and you do have to keep on top of it. So with that, I will stop and I will turn it over. I'm not sure who has it now. Is it Chris that has it next?
I think it's Rod.
Rod. Okay, Rod, you're up.
All right. Not quite sure why my screen doesn't want to stay up, but let's see if I can share my content still. Can everybody see my presentation? Can anyone see my screen?
Yes, yes,
Yes, it's up.
yes.
All right, so Mark, I'm not stealing your content, but I do have a lot of things that are somewhat similar. The two topics I wanted to cover is really data protection for your small business, and then also some things about your workforce. I can tell you from the years of being a consultant of small businesses is that a lot of our customers came to us because the prior consultant that they were using or IT firm that they were using got them into some kind of trouble and they were unhappy with them. So we came in to clean up messes is what we did a lot. But a lot of those messes were very preventable, and in large measure, the culpability was shared quite distinctly, not only with the IT firm, but with the owner or principals of the business. So the first point, treating your data as carefully as physical assets. We lock our buildings, we lock our cars, we take care of them with insurance. We make sure that things are properly protected. We make sure that we have excess resources and things available to us. But many times we don't do that with the data that we are storing or using. Recognize that here at the bank, I need the bank buildings to work for the bank to function, but I also need to have access to the data. If I don't have the data, I might as well not have the business. There are many of you out there that you may have perfectly working systems at this point in time, but you need to prepare for the bad things that can happen. So you need to treat your data probably more importantly than you have been. And we'll cover some more of those things. We know that the most popular word in IT for the last 8 years or so is cloud. Clouds are wonderful. I like looking at them in the sky. When it comes to Amazon Web Service or Microsoft Service or anybody else's cloud service, you can trust them as much as you want. And you may be assured by looking at all the statistics that they can provide you is that their services never fail, except when they do. And it may not necessarily be the cloud service that has failed, but it could be the delivery of that data to you, whether the internet is down, your primary circuits and your backup circuits are down. It could be that equipment that you have to gain access to the cloud is down. If your information is local, you have protections for that. You have your own local backups. You have whatever you can afford for redundancy and availability, but you don't want to take your data eggs, put them out in the cloud, and assume that your worries are over for your data. There's many instances of breaches of that data, not necessarily lost where you can't get access to it, but they can be either breaches where someone else gains access to it, or you lose access to it for a time. So cloud storage, although it's seen as very efficient for you in cost, you have to make sure that your backup of your cloud data is also as robust as the storage or space that you have available to you. If you lose your data, whether it was on the cloud or your local systems, the end result is the same. The third point there, if you have an IT consultant that is handling your servers, your equipment, your network, and so therefore they're handling your backups. Question for you is, when is the last time that you have seen a report that they have provided to you of what was backed up, where it was backed up to, and that they have shown you that it has been restored successfully to another location? The only horror story I'll give you is a dentist that we worked with. They had a backup system in place. They rotated their tapes every night. Yes, I know this was back when there were tapes. They rotated their tapes every night. They had a wonderful solution of about 20 tapes. And what they never did was check to see if the backup service was actually running. So they lost 5 years worth of their dental practice information. They lost everything because they never actually ran a backup. They would have known if they had just tried to do one restore or had the IT company run one restore. They never did it. Your backup is as good as the restore. If you're not testing your data to make sure that it's available to you, it's literally worthless. Fourth point on there is keeping static point in time backups on unattached storage. You can go to Staples and spend $100 and get a hard drive that'll do a backup of a system, and then you can take it and put it in your desk drawer. Now, putting it in your desk drawer isn't necessarily the best place to keep a copy of your data, so it needs to be someplace physically secure. But you want to have your data in a place that ransomware cannot get to. Mark could tell you 50 million stories about ransomware nightmares of people losing all the information that is on systems and servers for days, weeks, months, or never getting it back. There's some big companies that are local that took years to try to recover, and who knows if they're actually recovered from it. Other than data, if it'll let me click, there we go. Your network users. Again, a lot of profitability in a small business is efficiency, but you can't be too efficient. There is nothing easy and there is nothing painless about security. A good rule of thumb to think about is, if what I'm doing for my security of my network and my people is easy, it's probably not secure, and there is something that I'm really missing. One of the big ones is when a user signs into their computer, they should never be an admin. They should never be a local admin. They should never be a network admin. When I'm working here on my network, although I'm an admin, my user that I do my work is not as an administrator. I'm a regular user. I am very restricted. If I need to do work as a network admin, I have to sign in as a network administrative user, do my work as that user, sign off, and go back to work as myself. Having too many rights just means that when I do something that impacts our security, whether it's an email or web browsing or anything else like that, I'm giving hackers way too much easy access to my network. So you cannot let users say, well, you know, it's another password to remember and it's another user to remember. There's no such thing as being able to have easy access on your network. You've got to be able to control access to your data. Disabled security features on your computers, whether it's Mac, whether it's Linux, whether it's Windows. There are many things that you can do to make your life on the network more secure. Again, it will always cause you more grief. When Windows 7, I guess it was, came out and it had their new little security box that would come up and ask you if you're sure you wanted to do something or enter a password, you were allowed to turn that off. So an awful lot of people did it. And in fact, they're just sabotaging the security that is in the system to prevent automated routines from running and getting control of your network, etc. Ransomware being one of the top ones. Number 3, getting periodic reports of your user rights. If you have 6 people on your network or you have 600 people on your network, it comes back to and references number 1 about people not having too many rights. You need to make sure that users that you have let go from the company or have moved on to other positions don't retain old rights, don't still have control of things that they shouldn't. If someone had VPN access, you have to know that they're gone and you have to know that their access is removed. It's the kind of thing that you need to make sure that you're policing yourself. If you get your cyber insurance to help protect you, but you're not protecting yourself, there's even probably places in that cyber insurance, and Mark, you could nod or whatever, but I'm pretty sure that if you're not taking reasonable protections of your stuff, cyber insurance may not still even cover you, depending on what that is, if you're showing negligence to controlling your network. How many of you have had an IT consultant say to you, well, it's too hard for us to get into your systems during the day, we're doing too much of the work, so if you just leave whatever your remote control software running through the night, we'll get to your systems and we'll connect it and take care of that. We'll just show you that we billed you for 2 hours worth of work and we did it at 10 o'clock at night. Leaving your systems open to the internet with an active connection, looking for someone to connect to it, is crazy in this day and age. I can tell you that I get a report whenever our network is scanned. So we've been scanned by somebody in Iran from different addresses, probably I'd say a good 100 or so times in the last month. We've been scanned by addresses that are inside this country, probably 20 times more than that. And it's just someone looking for an entrance to see how addresses respond. Leaving open invitations for someone to start investigating you and looking to get connected to you is just so unsafe. If you have consultants that need to do work, you need to create a connection for them, monitor them, terminate it when it's done. If you're not doing that because of ease of use or timing or what you're considering efficiency, you're not doing anything for your security. Number 5, this one's a tough one because real life is real life. Discourage workers from using your network for their private work. I have this conversation with our team here, I don't know, let's say every other week. And it's not that I'm yelling at them and telling them that they're doing things they're not supposed to do. It's I'm keeping them aware that if any email that is coming into our system as a result of them browsing somewhere they shouldn't be, or any email that is coming into our system appearing to be legitimate, and Mark showed you that sample, that's from an outsider, every single one of those is a potential security breach. And it is hard, it is getting harder for us to know the good guys from the bad guys, or the legitimate mail, the legitimate messaging source from bad. Crooks are getting way better at disguising themselves. Crooks are way better at their grammar and everything else. It used to be fun to watch some of their crude emails that no one would fall for. But when I'm flooded with emails from school districts, car repair shops, other local businesses, chatting between my team members and other team members at some other institution, it is way harder for us to filter out what is legitimate and to prevent incidents, let's just say. We take a very conservative approach here, and my team members don't necessarily always appreciate us having to look at attachments and emails, but it's the only way to keep us safe. If you're not doing any monitoring, and if you're not actively discouraging users from doing their home work or their home play on your network, you're asking for trouble. That is it for me. I will turn it over.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. Let me see if I can share here. Does that look good there? Awesome.
Yep.
Hi, everybody. My name's Chris Shalor with Cristo IT Services. And it's an honor to be included in the panel. Some great information there from Mark and Rod. I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about just a couple of things, probably the most non-technical cybersecurity talk you've ever been a part of, and then follow up with a little bit of a quiz to give you kind of a self-audit as to where you are now. I'll give you a baseline and maybe some action items that you can take out of this and talk to an IT professional about where you want to go with the things moving forward. So we're in this new world. We're in this idea of a castle, and I know Mark and Rod had mentioned this. We've increased our surface area of attack. Because we're no longer in the four walls that we've been used to. We've now ventured out into the world. We're outside of that protective world. And two things of that. One, we didn't have to think about it a whole lot before because we had guards up on the walls that were protecting people and making sure the people who they were at the front gate. I'm going to run this analogy into the ground, people, so you're going to have to deal with it. So, but you had people at the gate checking in IDs to make sure that the people in the castle were the people in the castle. You had people up on the walls watching. So the people in the congregation didn't have to worry about this a whole lot. They were able to have some semblance of security just because of the protections around them. But because we've now moved out into the world, if everybody remembers, I got two girls. Everybody remembers Mulan, the cartoon, the opening scene of Mulan when the Mongols are first attacking, and you had people lighting the fires on the wall to alert that somebody had breached, because there was no communication method. Because we're all very, very separated, and everybody has a dig on Zoom. We communicate as much as we're able to right now through email, through Teams chat, through Teams chat, or through Zoom or whatever we have. But the communication is not exactly the same, and the bad guys are taking this into their advantage. So going out into that the world, we need to make sure that we have that communication really, really as front and foremost what we're doing. That communication needs to be back in the day, back in medieval days in the castle world, we had code words and counter words. We had wax seals to make sure that communications were verified. We had signal fires. There's a daily huddle maybe that you have in your organization. You have counter passwords. You have, if you're doing fund distribution, you have a plan and a series of protocols that you would have to adhere to. So you need to take advantage of these communications and make sure that you're doing a counter to everything that you think is going to happen. Make sure that somebody on the other side of the phone or the other side of the conversation knows exactly the same procedure and is following along. And that the people who are doing it, if anything isn't following along and anything doesn't smell right, light up that signal fire and let everybody know immediately. The people that were out wandering around, you now are covering way more people. Our people are out working out of their home offices. They're kind of little islands upon themselves. We need to help train them. We need to help get them involved in the security measures because we can't just rely on the IT people anymore. We need more eyes out there that are educated to Mark brought up that screenshot. We need more people to have that education to say, you know what, as soon as I see that EXT, that's my spidey sense should be tingling and I should be on high alert before I do anything whatsoever. We need to have those basic education premises throughout our organization, either through something different to make it repeatable and to make it interrupt. We're all dealing with a lot of noise right now. We're dealing with probably way more email than we're used to. We're dealing with way more conversations, more Zoom conversations than we're dealing with used to. You need to have something that elevates this to make sure that it gets through the noise and people get educated as far as what good security practices are. The bad guys, back in the medieval days, they used alternating periods of rushing the attack. And I know Rod mentioned that you have people coming in from Iran and just keep on knocking at the door. They used to have alternating periods of just an all-out frontal assault and then silence and luring you into a sense of submission or a calm. And using those alternating things, we need to make sure that things are happening. The FBI just made known this week that one of the greatest surface areas that we're dealing with in the upcoming 12 months is going to be supply chain management, manufacturing. That is where the targets are going to be. That is where the vulnerabilities are being seen. So we need to make sure that we're keeping our eye on those things as well. Quiz time. So I'm going to end here with a couple different questions, and I'll go through them as you can keep notes on a sticky pad, and I won't do any higher math or decimal points or anything like that. But this is a good way for you to get an idea of, have you taken care of some of the basic things that are required. And I'll leave this up there, and I know we're recording the presentation, so you can always just email me if you want to take the quiz on your own or something along those lines. But things like, do you have an antivirus? Do you have two-factor authentication in place? Do you have, we've done a lot of mentioning about these mobile devices. Do you have a mobile device management system in place? Have you encrypted all the hard drives on all the equipment in your office? Have you changed the password on the default password that came on that multifunction printer scanner that came from HP 3 years ago? Because it came with the default name and password, and have you changed that? So these sort of things, just give yourself 5 points, and if no cheating, if you don't know the answer, you don't get the points. You have to actually know the answer and be sure and confident of it before you get the points on that. So you get 5 points for each one of these. 10 points. Do we have different levels of user access control? Rod, awesome point. If you are, unfortunately, the person who is responsible for handling some of the internal IT at your system, just because you know a little something more about computers, are you making sure that you're acting as two different people? Are you embracing that bipolar personality that you love and breathe, and you're acting as an admin, and then you're acting as an everyday Joe? Are you training the staff ongoing on how to use those Wi-Fi networks and to make sure that they're not doing any transactions if they're out in the world, out in the wild? Make sure that you know what you're connecting to. And do you adhere? There's different policies. I know Mark made a lot of mention about the CCPA. You have the new law, 2018 law up in New York with the NFS 500. All of these things, do you have a governance that you have to adhere to? And are you adhering to some sort of essential standard? So give yourself 10 points for any one of these that apply to you. And then finally, how are we doing? Do you have an incident response plan? What happens when it does happen? Because it is going to happen. I hate to break the news to everybody, we can protect all day long, but eventually you're going to have a problem. Do you have a plan in place? Everybody remembers the fire drills when we were in 6th and 7th grade and everything like that, and you had to practice and everything like that. You have to practice this. You have to make sure that you have a plan and that the people know where to go, who to communicate with, and what's going to happen when the chips fall where they may. Do you have a bring your own device policy? What happens when, as Rod and Mark mentioned, when you bring that personal machine to work, or you're using that personal machine at your home office, because we're all in this world, what happens if you have a problem with that? Do you know what the people are responsible for and what they're not responsible for? And do you log any of that activity? So again, you give 20 points for this, and the score finally, if you scored 0 to 49, you should call somebody immediately. You need to talk to somebody, make sure that you have somebody who does this for a living take care of them. You need to make sure that you're immediately addressing this information. If you scored in the high end on the 50 to 99, you've made some efforts. You've done the yeoman's share of what you're going to be doing there. You're probably at a good place. Now, with some of these new laws that are coming, as far as Mark is concerned, it's probably not to the point where you're able to say with any kind of confidence that you're adhering to any kind of governance, whether it be HIPAA or FINRA or SEC guidance, any of those types of things. You're probably not to that level, and you probably need to do a few more things to get yourself up to those levels. And if you scored over 100 points, give me a call. We have openings available at Cristo IT, and I'd love to talk to you about them. But honestly, you've made a great job to that. Things are not static. You've seen the three of us talk today about how things are constantly changing on this, not even just during COVID time, but overall, things have been really, really accelerating, not even at a linear pace. They've really been going exponential as more and more people get exposed to this with this greater surface area of attack that we've been having over the past year. It's not going away anytime soon, and it's something that we have to be ever vigilant on. And turn my screen off here and send it back. How do I unshare? There we go.
Thank you so much, Mark, Rod, and Chris. I greatly appreciate your expertise and sharing your information. We do have some questions for you. So this question's for Mark. I'm receiving auto calls on my cell phone saying my social security number has been compromised and to contact their office. How do I report this, and how do I get this to stop? This actually happened to my husband as well, 4 times in a row yesterday.
Well, let's say the reason they do it is because it's effective. People fall for it. In answer to your specific questions, how do you report it? You can always go to the FTC website and report it. I would recommend you do that only if it makes you feel better. Nothing will happen. Nothing good will come from it. And you will go into a giant pile, just to be perfectly honest about it. What a lot of people do, and they do get satisfaction, is that there's websites like 1-800-NOTES.com and things like that, where you can go and report the actual phone number, so that if you're somebody, and I do this regularly, if I get a phone call from a number I don't recognize, and I'm sitting in front of my computer, I'll quickly Google that number and just see if it pops up. And it's about a 50% success rate to see who it is. And if it doesn't come up, or it comes up as like a landline or just something completely random, I just know it's them trying to get me to change my energy provider or something like that, so I can ignore it. But just don't expect any sort of reaction or response when you submit the complaint. The last thing I'll tell you, because your question was, how can I make it stop? You really can't. There's been a lot of movement at the FCC recently where the big carriers are supposedly getting on board of trying to block spoofing. The technology certainly exists. If you hear them tell you it's imminent, they're going to do it. But we'll see what happens. It's been a few months where it didn't flip the switch yet. I will say T-Mobile is actually really good at it. They have flipped the switch, and they are actively blocking those calls. And the last thing I'll say is that all the service providers, they do have sometimes free, but often $2 or $3 a month services where on your smartphone, it will kind of read that number as it comes in, and it will actively block it if you want it to. I use the Verizon one. It's free. I do every once in a while see it pop up and say, we blocked this number. And I have them disconnect it, not send it to voicemail, because that way the caller thinks it's a deadline. But that's something you can do yourself if you want to look into it, and just poke around on their website or Google it. But they do have those services out there that you can install on your phone. And there's no more Robo, by the way, if you want to pay for it. They're perfectly fine also, but they're not always up to date, so you may find that a lot of calls still get through. I mean, my general rule is if I don't know the number, I don't pick up.
I'll add something on that. For people who are seeing spoofing where they're trying to get money transfers or some sort of, they're trying to spoof a an authorization for currency to be transferred. You can also use ic3.gov, which is the FBI information page, and you can file a complaint there. Again, I would completely agree with Mark. It will go into the pile. They do use the vectors that are being used as patterns. So they do start forming those patterns to start trying to establish some sort of prevention defense by the sheer number of information that's coming in.
Another question is it safe to have passwords saved on your computer where it pre-fills as you type? Chris, you're shaking your head no.
If you're using a password system, LastPass is probably one of the more well-known ones out there, where you actually have two-factor authentication on it, and it actually expires after a certain period of time. You'll get me with the raised eyebrow, yes. Anything that's built into the computer is a dead fast no for me. You're going to want to make sure that you're using something that has something that you have, a password or a cell phone that gives you a 6-digit code, and something that you know before you unlock the gates to literally everything that you own.
It really comes down to risk. If you reuse your passwords at multiple websites, or you use the same usernames and passwords that you're using for home and personal stuff that you're using at work, you could be dooming you and you could be dooming your company. I do not ever want one of my team members here at work to use, or I would never use my rkip@harleysvillebank.com email address to sign into any site that is personal. And I would never use any password twice anywhere. I don't trust, well, okay, so Capital One's probably not a great example since they were the last really huge hack. But I wouldn't trust any company with either my username or my password because so many places have been hacked. Mark just said it himself earlier that emails aren't constituted or weren't constituted as personal information. So you can assume that your email addresses are out in play. So if I have my work email address compromised, which it probably is, and I have any number of passwords compromised in the last 10 years that I've been using at Yahoo and Google and Amazon Prime, or I don't know, what are the music's YouTube, so many industries and websites that have had very lax security. If I ever use one of those passwords again, it's craziness because they're all out in the wild. So when you watch a hacker demonstrate how he hacks things, he goes and finds a list of usernames and addresses, and then he goes and finds a separate list where he does actually have access to people's passwords. And once he sees the passwords and he gets anywhere close to a match, now he knows he can go try your email system with 2 or 3 tries. And out of 1,000 people, he's going to get a whole bunch of them. And then now that we're all working from home with our VPNs, he's got potential to log in and spoof a VPN connection and log into people's works and all kinds of things. So take your passwords seriously, take your username seriously. Again, it's a reason not to do work or not to do private stuff at work. And you have to keep them separate. If you don't keep them separate and you don't insist other people to keep them separate, again, you're creating your risk immeasurably.
Right, I have a statement and a question. Kim said, thank you, everyone. She needs a security plan, regular action, and cybersecurity insurance. The quiz is such a great template to start this plan. And Chris, is your template of your quiz available aside from on the PowerPoint?
People can email me and I can send it over to them. I'll spoil the suspense. It's really taken out of NIST standard guidelines. That there's no magic there that I've created or anything like that. But I'd be happy to walk through what some of the questions mean with anybody who has a question on it.
Awesome, thank you. And Chris's information will be available at the end also. Ransomware is on everyone's mind and attacks have grown in sophistication. Having said that, I read as the US Treasury has made it a crime for ransomware victims to pay ransom. Is that the actual case?
I have not heard that.
I was on a conference call with some very large healthcare providers, billions of dollars. They were asked that question. So if ransomware came in and attacked and got like a little office or something, would you pay that? No, we definitely not pay that because we were abiding by those laws. So if ransomware came in and took down your actual core software that you're hosting internally and you had no other way to get that data, would you pay that ransomware? They said, of course. So whether it's illegal or not, if a company doesn't have access to the data, I can guarantee you that they're going to try to pay or get around. I mean, you're talking about your business. So if you have $1 million business or $1 billion business or $1 trillion business, that people are going to make the decision that keeps them in business.
A verified air-gapped backup is your #1 defense on any of this stuff. A verified, protected, air-gapped backup, it will prevent 99.9% of the problems that you're going to encounter.
Yeah, I think the question's referring to recent guidance that came out from OFAC, the Department of Treasury, basically saying that, you know, we haven't been watching this very closely or enforcing it at all. But if you end up paying a ransom to a terrorist organization, we're going to hold you civilly and criminally liable. So it raised a lot of eyebrows when this came out. So it's not illegal to pay a ransom, never has been. It is illegal to give money to a terrorist organization. And unfortunately, a lot of these ransomware threat actors are terrorists and they're on lists. And so it's become much more of a burden for the company paying the ransom, the lawyer advising the company paying the ransom, et cetera, to go and actually make sure that we do our investigation and we're as reasonably confident as we can be that we're not giving money to a terrorist organization. The downside of it is if we do all this due diligence, if we end up falling for false flags or we miss something, it's strict liability, meaning that if they did decide to come after us, it wouldn't matter how much we tried to do the right thing. The fact is we gave money to a terrorist. And I think that's probably the news that you've been seeing as far as it becoming illegal to pay a ransom. That's not technically right. It's illegal to give money to a terrorist organization.
Thank you for clarifying that. Twofold question, what's the best or better malware spam software? And does dividing your hard drive protect at all?
The best antivirus is one that's used and updated and actually attended to. Brand is, there's always arguments about brand and what the logo is on the front of the box, but you have to have somebody paying attention to it and attending to it, and that's going to escalate anything better. I don't want to be wishy-washy on that. We use WebRoot. If you had 8 other IT firms up here, you'd have 8 other answers, but you need somebody who's actually watching the farm.
Okay, I have one last question. PA House Bill 40 to establish IT governance, oversight, and cybersecurity standards was introduced January 11th. How long do you think it will take for this bill to become law?
I don't have a crystal ball, but I think it'll be a very long time considering the current state of the House in Pennsylvania. And it's not very likely, and this isn't meant to be a political comment, but it's not very likely that a Republican-controlled House is going to be pushing a privacy consumer rights bill through. And I don't know, we'll see. You know, I was surprised when we had Virginia pass the way that it did. So that happened on lightning speed. And it may be a tipping point for a lot of states, but I don't have a lot of expectation that this will go anywhere.
I apologize. I didn't answer the other half of the question, Gene. So is dividing your hard drive protect you at all? No. There's no protection there.
All right. Brian, did you want to wrap up?
Okay, thank you. And thank you to the panelists. It was awesome information. And thank you to Kim again for having us as part of the Zoom and Air series with the chamber. If you would like the PowerPoints presentations, we can email them to you, and or if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to any of us. It will be the contact information will be up shortly for everyone. Thank you again.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your
Thank
time.
you.
Thank
guys.
you.
Great information.
Patient.
We'll see you soon. Thank you,
We're good.
everyone.
Thanks, Kim and Gene, for putting this together.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you guys. Happy Wednesday. We're more than halfway through now. It's afternoon.
There we go.
I'm going to sign off. If anybody has any file, Gene, I sent you over. I didn't really update much, but I sent you over the latest PowerPoint that I put here. So
Awesome. Thank you.
have a great afternoon, guys.
You too. Take care.
All right, thanks, Gene.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
it worked.
We got that one in the books.
Yes.
Appreciate all your help with organizing the Zoom and Air, the Zoom part of it. I'll talk to you in a little bit, I'm sure.